All right. So, Missouri GOP State Chairman Ed Martin has called for an investigation into the race baiting ads in Mississippi. He's calling for a clean sweep of any vendor involved in doing any of this kind of committee work that produced these ads. We're standing in front of one of the largest media vendors to the NRSC and the NRCC. And it is an incontrovertible fact that one of this firm's top officials, John Farrell, signed buy orders for race baiting ads all over the state of Mississippi. He did it under the firm name National Media, and he did it under the form name American Media. We know not because their client, All Citizens for Mississippi, filed required FEC disclosures. They have not, which is blatantly illegal. We know because Rick Shafton and I did the work nobody in the media bothered to do and obtained the order forms directly from the radio stations throughout Mississippi. Nobody at National Media, All Citizens for Mississippi, or the NRSC will return our calls for comment. Now, Rick here has alleged a very serious crime that would explain all of these known facts. There is no proof that his theory is true, but there is also no proof that it is not true. And the American people and the people of Mississippi deserve the answers. Now, part of the reason I started my site, gotnews.com, was to try and tell the stories much in the same way that sites like Gawker and TMZ and others have over the years, to try and tell the stories that no one else will talk about on the record or in public. And so I intend to publish stories from people like Mr. Shafton here, and like many other sources who've come forward, and there'll be more stuff coming forward with going to the height of the Republican establishment in the coming days who authorized these racist ads. And I would also say that Senator Ted Cruz has also come forward, and many others are starting to come forward as well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Rick, and afterwards I'll be happy to answer your questions, and Rick too. So thank you.
Well, what happened here on June 20th was that National Media got $175,000 from the National Republican Senatorial Committee to do phone calls, to produce and place ads in Mississippi, according to the Federal Election Commission reports, in support of Thad Cochran. But none of those ads ever appeared. What did appear from the same day, from ads placed from this exact same building, were ads from a group called All Citizens for Mississippi that has not filed any contribution or expenditure reports with the Federal Election Commission, and those ads were vicious and vile in attacking Chris McDaniel. So no one's explained who funded those ads, but the person who signed the paperwork is the same person who signs the paperwork for all the buys for the National Republican Senatorial Committee and claims to be a compliance expert. So what we're charging here is that this $175,000 was never spent on ads from the National Republican Senatorial Committee, but was laundered criminally to run ads for a group called All Citizens for Mississippi that refuses to file with the Federal Election Commission. And what really disgusts me about this whole thing is that people are sending $5 and $10 to the National Republican Senatorial Committee to defeat Harry Reid. But that's not where the money's going. It's going to run vile ads against Chris McDaniel. And these are the people who are responsible for this money laundering and this criminal activity. So what we're here today to talk about is, first of all, to call attention to this and to hope that there'll be some coverage and investigations, but more than that. Number one, there has to be a new election in the state of Mississippi. There's questions about the vote. That's one of many questions. The biggest question is, were there serious criminal violations of federal campaign law, of, in this case, I believe wire fraud by transmitting a false report to the Federal Election Commission, knowingly false, with an intent to deceive those who read it. That is the standard definition of fraud. If I send a false statement to a bank for a mortgage, that is wire fraud. If I send a false statement to the Federal Election Commission, that is also wire fraud. It is the exact same crime. And that crime was committed by the people in this building, in National Media, who claim to be fighting for Republicans around the country who want to defeat Harry Reid. So the second thing we're calling for today is that the Republican Party stop giving any money to the people in this building. And that goes for the party organizations, the Republican National Committee, the Senatorial Committee, the Congressional Committee. We're also calling on any candidate in the United States that is hiring national media to fire them immediately because of their actions here today. Thirdly, there has to be a criminal investigation of this, because the people who are defrauded here aren't just the voters of Mississippi. They're the Republican donors all over the country who think they're trying to save this country by getting rid of Harry Reid, and instead ran ads that are even more outrageous than the ones that Democrats run against Republicans. I mean, we heard about these ads: if you don't vote, Klan will come back. If you don't vote. These ads are right in that same league, but they weren't done by Democrats. They were done by Republicans, by the people on our team. They're not on our team. They're on the other team. So that's my comment here.
Okay. So with that, I guess we'll take questions. Got anything?
Well, what's your response to Stevie Fielder's interview in the Clarion Ledger yesterday? Where
Sure.
he was saying that he was offered or asked to buy votes but didn't do it.
Sure. Well, he's now he confirmed his the initial interview we did at Got News. He confirmed that with Breitbart's Matthew Boyle, and he has now said that, from my understanding, he has walked back some of those claims. I intend to release either early next week. I intend to release more documentation showing cash and envelopes being handed out throughout the state of Mississippi. Fielder was not the only individual in question. I would note that Fielder has had essentially gone into hiding afterwards. Breitbart did confirm it. Other reporters have also confirmed it. My reading of the interview that Jeff Pender of the Clarion Ledger posted, my reading of that is that he implicates Salim Bard even more. We also know that Reverend Fielder is aware that the audio recording that we produced does show that he's committed a crime, and so he might be trying to cover his ass, essentially. So that's kind of my reading of it. But I do intend to release more instances as well. I'm not troubled by it. People can draw their own inferences from the audio. We did ask the same question over and over, to be clear. And I would note that Reverend Fielder, in the initial story, and I've been forgive us because this is a startup, but in the initial story I did mention that we bought his story. We did in fact buy his text messages. We gave him the money then, and then he consented to an interview afterwards. Whether that colors the story, I leave to readers to judge. I would note that David Frost purchased the Nixon tapes. Oprah pays for interviews. There's a long history of checkbook journalism in Britain, and I actually think that practice is more ethical in some respects than doing book promotion deals or in doing any of the other sorts of ways that sources are compensated with fancy dinners and that sort of thing. And I won't say, people have asked me to comment on how much I paid him. I won't say how much we paid him, just because I don't want to create a market for the kind of, what that would do is that would create a problem for Got News, in the sense that people would come forward and they would expect a certain amount of money, and that I don't want there to be prices on which type of stories that can be released. So.
Yeah, what legal precedent is there for a new election? You're saying that there should be a new election because there's, in theory, NBC. Is there any legal precedent?
Well, there have been elections that have been thrown out for any variety of reasons.
Hattiesburg was thrown out
The Hattiesburg mayor's race.
But that was because they called into question the votes. Not because
Right. Well, they called into question votes and absentee ballots, but
that's also ongoing as we speak.
See, here what we have here isn't just votes. It isn't just laundered money. You also have this whole thing with the cash, with the street money that was sent around. And here's the bottom line: if you can violate campaign finance laws with no ramifications, and then say, well, the election's over and we won, so let it count, that tells me that I should advise every client to violate every federal campaign finance law, and then when we win, hey, it's over, we won. I mean, don't you have these laws for a reason? So, I mean, there's so many egregious, it's not just one. They violated practically every law in the book. And it's so outrageous that it's tainted the election. Any number of these illegal activities, whether it's the laundered money, the cash, the
Amanda
Shook, the double voting. It's all these things. The combination of all of them has to lead anybody to question the integrity of the ballot box here, and that's the grounds to call for a new election. So that's the and there have been other presses where for whatever reason there's so much fraud, or I think there was a Louisiana congressional race maybe 20 years ago, similar situation, where they just threw it out because they didn't know who won.
And there's a precedent in Mississippi. I mean, I don't vote. I'm not registered to vote, so it's up for the people of Mississippi to decide this in their own process. Rick can call for a new election, and I think people are calling for a new election. But I would just note that there is a precedent for it. Mississippi, there's a great election expert named John Pittman High, who I spoke with last week. Mr. High has a history of getting elections overturned. He says in Mississippi, based upon his expertise, that that if you lose an election with less than 5% margin, that the election was probably stolen. And he's documented many instances over his career of elections being overturned by the courts.
So Mississippi is an election by less than 5% of the votes in each county. So
That's his argument. Yeah. And I can put you in touch with him.
But here's really what should happen. Thad Cochran should just step down. And the reason he should step down is because he's a terrible candidate going into November, and he's probably going to lose the seat. So if the whole purpose of the National Republican Senatorial Committee is to elect Republicans, they need to tell this guy to get out, because he is not going to win. He's not going to win. And I feel bad for them because they're just throwing this guy out there. He's not capable of running or serving. And it's going to be very embarrassing to him. And his entire 42 years in Washington is going to be remembered by this campaign. And if these people really care about Thad Cochran, the person, the human being, they need to get him out, because he is just going to be embarrassed and humiliated by this. And he's not going to win. And that's going to be the summary of his 42 years, was he was defeated because of his campaign. And the only way they're going to hold the seat is with Chris McDaniel as the candidate. And that's becoming apparent more and more every single day.
Tim Hannigan, managing editor for Fairfax News. Can you go over how do you trace the flow of money from the NSRC to?
Well, yeah. I mean, we saw the $175,000 transferred. So I called around to radio stations in the state, not just African American. I mean, just major outlets, Clear Channel, Cumulus, throughout the state. Did you get any advertising from the National Republican Senatorial Committee? No, we got Chamber of Commerce, National Association of Realtors, Senate Conservatives Fund. I got the whole list of who, Citizens United, who's everywhere. No National Republican Senatorial Committee. Can you check again? You sure you didn't get National Republican Senatorial Committee? No, we got Cochran, we got McDaniel, no. So then, enough radio stations that clearly didn't run any ads. I mean, if you didn't run ads on Super Talk Mississippi from the Republican Senatorial, you weren't running radio. But I checked a lot of other places anyway. Then TV, okay? And I only had to check 3 places for TV. I checked Memphis because it's online, nothing. Citizens United was on there, Senate Conservatives Fund was on there, but no National Republican Senatorial Committee. Then I called Channel 3 in Jackson. Right, if you're going to buy TV in the state of Mississippi, you're buying Channel 3 in Jackson. And they give you, the Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors, Senate Conservatives Fund, same suspects. No National Republican Senatorial Committee. Okay, maybe they targeted the Delta with these ads. Wouldn't make much sense. Maybe they did it. Called Channel 6 in Greenville, which is what you would buy if you were buying the Delta. Nothing there. They did have Citizens United, though. Citizens United's on top of things. No National Republican Senatorial Committee. So when I went on Brian Fisher's show on Monday, I held back a little bit. And I said, maybe there's some ads, maybe I didn't find them. I'd like to know. We'd like to know where this money was spent. Nothing from these guys, nothing from the Senatorial Committee. Nobody said we were lying. They said, well, we didn't buy any broadcast TV. We didn't buy any radio. We spent it all on digital. Now, we checked with people who do digital. I do some, but I'm not an expert the way some are. So it was like, well, how could you spend $69,000 in digital advertising in 4 days in the state of Mississippi? Is it possible? And one out of 4 people said, yeah, it's possible if you bought like every single ad for 4 days, which means that everybody in the state of Mississippi would have seen something on their computer saying paid for by the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Now, so there was, and so this web ad that they supposedly did, this 33-second web ad, there was one problem with it. It attacked Chris McDaniel, but their disclosure from the Senatorial Committee for the money that they paid national media were for ads supporting Thad Cochran, not ads opposing a candidate, but ads supporting a candidate. So then they had to take this video down because it didn't fit the narrative of what they put on their reports. So they said, well, we had a 15-second radio ad. Now, you can't buy 15-second radio units, but you can on Pandora. So maybe they bought Pandora with this money. Now, it's impossible at 1 cent per impression to buy $69,000 worth of impressions on Pandora in 4 days. That's 6,900,000 impressions. That would have meant everybody in the state of Mississippi listening to Pandora would have heard it like 100 times. It wasn't happening. It didn't happen. They didn't run any Pandora ads. Plus, their alleged radio ad doesn't even have a paid-for line on it. So they couldn't have run it. They didn't run it. They lied. And they lied. The problem they have is they lied on a document that they sent electronically to the Federal Election Commission, knowing it was false and with the intent to deceive those who would read it. And that is wire fraud, and that is punishable by prison, and anybody who commits wire fraud belongs in prison. And I'll say another thing, and I've been critical of Dinesh D'Souza some people say, no, he committed a crime, and he's going to go to jail for this crime. And these people belong in jail also. If Dinesh D'Souza is going to prison, these people belong in prison.
I have a question, Charles.
Go ahead, Karen.
Where's Ted Cruz in all of this? He's secretary of the committee. Has he made a statement of any kind?
Yeah, so I mean, Ted Cruz the other day came out and said that he found the race baiting ads to be appalling. And I think this, my political analyst hat, I think this will differentiate him considerably from Rand Paul and some of the other candidates, because he's actually coming out in favor of there being an investigation into these race baiting ads. And so yes, he's come out. A number of conservative figures have come out, questioned the results. Many people, I mean, Rick here was criticizing me for saying that this election was fraudulent initially, and has come to my position. Many other people have also kind of walked back some statements that they've made. And I expect to see more of that in the days to come. I've talked to Chris McDaniel. I've posted some of that online as well, on Twitter and elsewhere. And I've tried to reach out to Thad Cochran. He's very difficult to get a hold of. I've left 25 different phone calls on his message service. And I really just want to know what happened here. I think, these types of tactics will be used in the future if they're not called out now, and they need to be examined, and they need to be really asked. And as somebody who's not a Republican, but who's been registered as a Republican, Democrat, and Independent, I find it really kind of disturbing that this kind of thing can go on in 2014. It's kind of odd. So I congratulate the senator in actually taking a principled stand on this, calling out the NRSC, of which he's the vice chair. I've asked some of his people if he would resign from that position, and they have said he will not, and they've said that they want a seat at the table, and that they want to actually give the NRSC an opportunity to do the right thing, which of course is something that I believe should be done as well. People should have the opportunity to do the right thing, to turn state's evidence. We're already seeing that with some of the investigations going on in Mississippi, that people who are in the Cochran camp are no longer in the Cochran camp, and that they're turning over evidence. And there'll be more stuff to report on that in the days to come.
And, I just want to add something to what Chuck said, because I'm very critical of a lot of allegations of vote fraud. I think it happens very rarely, and the reason it happens very rarely is you have to enter into a conspiracy with lots of people to do this, and somebody's going to talk. And this is it. But so I've been around politics since I was 10 years old, and people who are pros, they don't do these things because there's lots of votes. They can do it legally. They can do things. But when you're in a panic situation, or this is when people break the law and they all go to jail. They all get caught. And what amazes me is that these aren't like local political hacks who don't know any better. This is Haley Barbour, who was going to run for president, and it was somebody I was a fan of at one time. And the National Republican Senatorial Committee that nukes us with emails and fundraising mail all the time because we have to stop Harry Reid. Send us my Stop Harry Reid. But the money goes here to go attack Chris McDaniel. and it's just it's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen. And I talk to hardened political operatives who can't believe this.
Is anyone concerned about the story that I read in the Hill, I believe 2 days ago, that Senator Cochran was disoriented?
Well, we've heard reports for quite some time that the senator, like his wife, who's been in a nursing home since 2000, has suffered from dementia. We've heard about him, his mental health not being well. I can't confirm those reports because, again, I've called the Cochran people 25 times. It is interesting how much they control access to him, how he refused to debate, how he did when I was in Mississippi. He only did one fundraiser, and it was in an airport, and he was flanked by aides. And these were days right before the election, and so I found that very odd. It kind of reminds me, honestly, of the scene from The Lord of the Rings, of that king who's being whispered to in the ear by all of these different, and then he's kind of stuck in this paralysis state. I mean, on a personal level, I feel bad for Senator Cochran. This is 42 years. He was a distinguished naval officer. He's had a long career, much of it, up for debate. I mean, his refusal to be against a statement condemning lynching, I thought was repugnant. But otherwise, he's been a conservative figure in his many years in office. Maybe not ideologically conservative, but conservative in a small c sense. And so I feel bad. I feel bad for him. I feel bad for his family. I know his daughter has expressed some sadness about how ugly the race has gotten. And I also, he lives in D.C. He lives in Maryland, on Maryland Avenue with his mistress, who is a longtime aide of his, who, that home, you can read other reports on this, Matthew Boyles and other places, but that home was, the funding for that home came through Trustmark, which is a bank that has given a $250,000 loan to the PAC that supported Cochran. And so
Another violation. Another one of the many.
And so for me, as I've been identified on kind of the conservative right on a lot of these things, but it's really raised a lot of interesting campaign finance questions that should make a lot of people uncomfortable in this country. Because if you're seeing all this money flow in, you have to ask, what are the people actually getting out of it? And a lot of people see an opportunity with the Republicans potentially poised to take the United States Senate to have Thad Cochran become the chief appropriator in the country. And I think this is and Haley Barbour, who of course is one of the biggest lobbyists in the United States, perhaps the world, who's represented many dictators and foreign governments over the years. This is a great opportunity for him to continue his gravy train. And I think that the gravy train needs to be put to a halt, that there needs to be a serious investigation here, not just in terms of the fraud, which is becoming apparent from people on the ground in Mississippi, but also in terms of the money, the money question. And I've said this before and say it again. I've helped law enforcement in the past on scandals. I'm happy to help the FEC, the FBI, anyone interested in this question, to go and find out what actually happened here.
But they really don't need our help because the evidence is so clear; it speaks for itself. And they haven't. These guys, the senatorial committee, they haven't been able to produce anything because there's nothing there. And this is now. I made my initial charges on Monday, repeated them on Wednesday. Today is Friday, and nobody is saying I'm lying. I'm sitting there making statements that if they're false, they can sue me for libel, and I am not judgment-proof. So I'm making these statements at potentially personal risk, but I'm very confident in them because I see what's there, and it's so obvious. The only thing I'm getting out of Slater's Lane when I call these stations are orders for all citizens for Mississippi. Now, another little thing they did to try to make it look different, see, national media at 815 Slater's Lane didn't place those orders. They were placed by American media, also located at 815 Slater's Lane. So, American media. So they have national media and American media. And then they also have like a national media next door. Some of the forms said 817 Slater's Lane. And then you check on the door, there's a little sign that says national media there too. So it was national media that did this buy. And if they say, oh, we had a firewall, it's a lie. I mean, whatever excuse these guys come up with is a lie. And we all know it's a lie. And anybody in politics knows it's a lie. And they say, oh, we had a firewall, we didn't coordinate. Oh, come on. They didn't coordinate. The guy works here. He's the guy who does their political buys. Of course they coordinated.
So,
Dave.
What is the next step legally? When you've been talking about the accusations, is there somebody who has standing to sue? Is it somebody needs to file an FEC complaint? What is it you're talking about? And it sounds like this exists independently of whether the election in Mississippi is certified. That's what
Sure.
you're talking about here. If the election certified,
Because this is
there's no
beyond
election.
Mississippi. This is, you know, and Chuck said it yesterday in a tweet, or in a comment, and I retweeted, that this isn't about Chris McDaniel. This is about the future of our country and the people that we're trusting to help us take back the United States Senate, to take back our country, are not on our side. And that's what this is about.
What's the legal step, though? Is it somebody should sue?
an FEC
Well, I'm not an
complaint-
attorney, so
I
I'm
mean,
not going to speak
neither-
on that,
neither-
but I'll file an FEC complaint.
Yeah, anyone can file an FEC complaint. I know that that's already being looked at by a number of people, not just in Mississippi, but also here in DC. And as I'm not an attorney myself, I do think that there's definitely grounds for
Could
an
be a good
FEC
one, though.
complaint. No, I wouldn't. But I do think there's grounds for an FEC complaint, and I do think it probably will proceed. And I've made this clear in public statements. I've also made this clear in private back channels with the FEC and with the FBI that I'm happy to give any information. I'm also happy to give them some information I have not yet made public, but which will be made public in the coming weeks.
And by the way, there are more ads from all citizens from Mississippi that have been released already.
Yeah.
We,
Who provides oversight for the SEC if they refuse to investigate?
For the FEC?
Yes.
It's a good question.
well, the FEC will investigate this. The FEC is an equal opportunity group of people. They will investigate this, and it's a very serious. And I'll tell you another thing. What happened in Mississippi? This isn't the first time these people have done this either. When people get caught, it's never the first time they did it. It's the first time I shoplifted, the first time I drove drunk, you know, the first time I smoked crack, right? No, it's not the first time they've done it. It's not the first time the Senatorial Committee has done this. And an audit of everything over at the Senatorial Committee, and probably the Congressional Committee as well, and the RNC is going to find more of this over the years. This is just the time they got caught.
And we're seeing, by the way, I have a lot of emails that have been forwarded to me from RNC members. We're seeing that Henry Barber is currently saying that he had nothing to do with these racist ads, even though he has already said publicly that to National Review and to other publications that he did in fact know about them. And so he's trying to kind of play a cute game, and that's increasingly going to be shown that he's been lying, and because he recognizes that this is damaging to his career.
How confident are you that the FEC will not be forced on
They can't. They can't sweep this under the rug. This is too big. This is too obvious what happened here. You know, there's another little element of fraud also. These guys charged the National Republican Senatorial Committee for $13,000 to allegedly produce media. But the only two things that they could show was this 33-second web ad attacking Chris McDaniel, which then they really couldn't claim was part of it because it attacked McDaniel instead of being pro-Cochran. And then this alleged 15-second radio ad with no paid-for line and an accompanying video. That between the two of these, if they paid $1,000 to get these produced, they got ripped off.
And Rick, you should probably talk about the NAB forms and how certain places are complying and certain are not.
Well, that's a little separate thing. Although we find some stations, you know, this is like another separate, maybe separate, maybe not, because we still don't know who paid for those Citizens for Progress ads. There's no NAB form. There was like a check from somebody, but no group or anything, no record of Citizens for Progress. There may be other groups like that operating in the state, and there may be other ads, and who knows what else.
And
is
we've
gonna come out.
got the stuff with Bishop Crudup, running a legal super PAC out of his church, working with the Cochran Barber machine.
And they still haven't filed contributions or expenditures.
So, which is a big FEC violation as well. So with that, I think if that answers everyone's questions, I'm happy to, if you have any emails, I'm going to be posting my initial statement online. We're going to take this video and put it online as well so that people can see for themselves. And you're happy to embed it, use it however you see fit. And I think that with that, I think we'll conclude it. But thank you for coming, and
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing everyone and chatting afterwards.